Good morning. Welcome back to Step by Step to the Coming King. I think it's true to say, and I'm glad this is the case, that we are creatures that have been made to be optimistic and to be hopeful about things in life. I know there are some people who, are just doom and gloom merchants all the time. Fair enough. But I think most of us, we want to be hopeful. As I'm recording this today, I read today that it was the anniversary of the birth of Martin Luther King. And in the civil rights movement of the 1960s, there were many tremendous struggles, many great disappointments. Many of the leaders were killed or imprisoned or gave up or whatever. But people could always say, but at least we've got the doctor, Martin Luther King. At least we've got the good reverend on our side leading the cause, and he can give his sermons and his speeches. And as long as that's happening, all will be well. Well, then, of course, he was assassinated. And where do you go from there? At the moment now, in this health crisis that we're in, it's pretty doomy and gloomy. But at least we've got the vaccine on the way. That's right. And that's giving hope and optimism to people. But it doesn't mean that people are not going to continue to die. The vaccine can save us from the full force of this virus. It will operate like that for many people, but there's no vaccine to save us from death. My point is, we are optimistic people. We've been created to have hope. That's right. That's the way God has made us. But what if the hope is a false hope? What if what we put our hope and trust in is not reliable, is not trustworthy, and collapses underneath us? Then that's a very, very painful experience. And we find that in the Bible. The Bible is so realistic and honest about these things, and particularly these books of Kings and Chronicles. From Solomon onwards, we've seen it in the life of David, but it somehow goes into a new dimension now with Solomon, with his son Rehoboam and Jeroboam, who wasn't a son, but he became the rival king with a rival kingdom in the north. And we've seen how that is working out. We've seen the desperate idolatry and the judgment which will come upon that northern kingdom. That's for sure. But then we might say, yeah, but at least we've got Judah in the south. At least we've got Rehoboam. I mean, he's not much better, but at least they've got the temple anyway, haven't they? They've got the sacrificial system. They haven't got those golden calves, that blasphemy, that idolatry in the north. They haven't got any of that stuff going on. This is a sort of pure religion. And I know Rehoboam's not the best of men, but look, we've got so much. That's our hope. There's hope now. We can look to a bright and a sunny future if we're living here in the south. I have to tell you, sadly, our title today is Judah Goes the Same Way. Jeroboam led Israel down the drain. And at the same time, Solomon's son Rehoboam was doing much the same thing in the southern state of Judah. So we've got to have hope. And sometimes we express that hope, like with the present situation with the vaccine. Yeah, I mean, it's not wrong to have hopes and dreams and desires and an optimism that all will be well and we'll get back to some kind of normality. I mean, that's normal to think like that. But if we put all our hope and all our trust just in a jab or just in a drug, then that would be wrong, wouldn't it? And we'll be disappointed, because that's not the answer. That will not bring salvation. It'll do what it'll do, and we thank God for it. And similarly with these kings and these kingdoms in the Bible, the problem is we're created to be hopeful, optimistic people, but often that just goes too far, and we forget where our ultimate hope and trust is to be found, in God and God alone. So many things then come crashing down. They bring us to our knees. They bring us to hopelessness and despair, maybe, but only so that we will hope in God. Let's read from 1 Kings 14:21 to 15:6. Rehoboam, son of Solomon, was king in Judah. He was 41 years old when he became king, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel in which to put his name. His mother's name was Naamah. She was an Ammonite. Judah did evil in the eyes of the Lord. By the sins they committed, they stirred up his jealous anger more than those before them had done. More than those who were before them had done. They also set up for themselves high places, sacred stones, and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every spreading tree. There were even male shrine prostitutes in the land. The people engaged in all the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem. He carried off the treasures of the temple of the Lord and the treasures of the royal palace. He took everything, including all the gold shields Solomon had made. So King Rehoboam made bronze shields to replace them and assigned these to the commanders of the guard on duty at the entrance to the royal palace. Whenever the king went to the Lord's temple, the guards bore the shields, and afterward they returned them to the guard room. As for the other events of Rehoboam's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? There was continual warfare between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And Rehoboam rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David. His mother's name was Naamah. She was an Ammonite. And Abijah, his son, succeeded him as king. In the 18th year of the reign of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, Abijah became king of Judah, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 years. His mother's name was Ma'akah, daughter of Abishalom. He committed all the sins his father had done before him. His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his forefather had been. Nevertheless, for David's sake, the Lord his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem by raising up a son to succeed him, and by making Jerusalem strong. For David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and had not failed to keep any of the Lord's commands all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. Amen. Well, this is pretty sobering stuff again. And it does remind us that ultimately there's no one we can truly trust in. There's no one we should put our ultimate hope and trust in except God alone. That's why Rehoboam collapses. That's why little Judah in the south collapses. Why? Because of idolatry. What is idolatry? It is looking to something else or someone else as the source of our hope and our strength and our comfort and our joy. And that could be a pole with an image on it that you bow down in the middle of a field or on a mountainside in Israel 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. Or it could be a politician, a political system. Or it could be your partner, or it could be your children, or it could be your pastor, or it could be your church. Idolatry takes many different forms. Or it could be materialism. It could be stuff. If I only have enough money, if I just win the national lottery, then all will be well. If I just get that job, if I can get over this health scare, if I can be fit again. Now, these are just, again, like I've said, there's nothing wrong in having these desires, and we pray along these lines. There's nothing wrong with that, except if that becomes our God. That becomes the main thing we're obsessed with and concerned about. And God becomes a means to the end of getting those things. I think that's the most common form of idolatry in the world and in the church. And that's where Israel in the north went. Well, that's pretty understandable. I mean, Jeroboam is a pagan, and he institutes this horrendous, foul, idolatrous, blasphemous system of kind of rival religion up there. But in the south, they've got the temple, they've got the altar, they've got the sacrifices, they've got the law, they've got the real priesthood that was established historically in the kingdom by God. And yet, scratch under the surface, what are they like? It's like going to an evangelical church, and they tick all the boxes: FIEC, Baptist Union, Old Baptist Union. You know, on the surface, they're exactly what they should be, and that's good. Nothing wrong with that. But scratch under the surface, and idolatry is there, and this is so subtle, but it's so real. This is what we see with Judah now. They've got everything going for them. Everything's right on the surface. But look at 24b, or the whole of verse 24. They've begun setting up little shrines, sacred stones, Asherah poles on every high hill, under every spreading tree. There were even male shrine prostitutes in the land. The people engaged in all the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. In their worship, this is religion now. Yes, there's prostitution here. That's immorality. But they are shrine prostitutes in these little altars and shrines to Asherah, to Baal, to the gods of the nations that they had conquered and driven out. They've come back in, not as a military force, but as a religious force. It's the force of ideas. It's the force of beliefs and systems of religion that will be the downfall of these people, as it is, of course, of Great Britain today. I keep mentioning the wicked laws that we've passed over the last 70 years, and we're still in the habit of doing it. Where does that come from? It comes from ideas. People have changed their attitudes, changed their belief system. We've moved far, far away from biblical Christianity, and we've embraced and included in our legal system and in the social fabric of our nation wickedness. Where's that going to go? Where's that going to lead? Well, we'll see what happens to Rehoboam and the Judahites here, because God will not tolerate that. 14:25. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, attacked Jerusalem. There's going to be constant conflict and warfare. Verse 26, he carried off the treasures of the temple of the Lord and the treasures of the royal place. He took everything, including all the gold shields Solomon had made. They will be stripped of their treasures. So there's warfare, there's conflict, there's lack of peace, and there's impoverishment, there's defeat, and their historical treasures will be stripped away and taken away. I think this is very poignant for us today. Again, I don't want to push it too much, but the greatness of Great Britain, the reason we became great was because of faith in the Lord and in his word. I've no doubt about that. And not all, but many of those treasures, many of those blessings, many of those things which kept us safe and kept us well as a nation. And, our enemies who were defeated, so many of those things have gone now. We know that. And we can explain that in social terms, in cultural terms, in military terms. But I do think the root of everything is theological. It's happening in America at the moment. There's a turning away from God, and that will bring weakness and emptiness. And of course, other gods must fill the vacuum. And what happened here? Well, they worshipped Asherah. Asherah was a goddess of the Canaanites. And to worship Asherah involved immoral sexual acts. That's why they had those shrine prostitutes there. And they thought that by doing that, that would make the land grow better crops. She was a fertility god. And by having sex in her temple or near her shrine, they thought, well, that'll give you a better crop this year. And that'll make the people healthy and wealthy, and we'll be fruitful. We'll have the power that we need, and the fruitfulness and the bounty that we need. Of course, it's not wrong to desire those things. It's not wrong to pray for those things, but to put your hope and trust in a false god who doesn't even exist. I mean, they'd made these poles and these images and these shrines with their own hands. And idolatry is the projection of our own minds. These beliefs are lies. But it's more than that. It's not just that they're lies. They are profoundly hurtful, harmful, and offensive to God. Of course they are. Of course, amongst the people of God, to be behaving like this, to take on the belief systems of the world, to be behaving like the world. Many people say, don't they, today, well, it doesn't matter what you believe, really. It doesn't matter what you believe about God or the Bible or whatever. As long as you're sincere, as long as you don't hurt anybody or harm anybody, then what you believe, that's in a separate category. You can believe anything as long as you're sincere. But can you see how ridiculous that is? And how nonsensical that is? Of course it matters what you believe, because what you believe drives what you do. And it has enormous consequences. Take something like abortion. I mean, this is something I feel is a great issue that needs to be addressed. You never hear discussion about it in the media, hardly. But every day, thousands, tens of thousands of innocent children are being slaughtered, not just around the world, but in our own nation, in the same hospitals where they are doing so much good to save people from this virus and administer the vaccine. And that's where we've got to as a nation. And that's a consequence of what you believe. And that's a consequence of the kind of moral revolution that's taken place over the last 50, 60 years. So that we've got to the point where innocent human life is sacrificed and babies are killed every day. That's a form of idolatry. That's a form of paganism. and it's absolutely entrenched now in our society. You can't even mention that. If you do, you'll be shut down. You'll be shouted down. Who's saying it? I know a few Catholics here, and even a few Muslims there, and a few Christians along the way. Actually, there's a lot of people who believe this and are trying to say this, but don't think you'll get an opening in the media, because we've moved as a society. Now, we are not Old Testament Judah. I'm not saying that. But I just want you to see that there are some parallels here. As this society moved in a particular direction, away from God, away from his word, there cannot be a vacuum spiritually. So what pours into that? Ideas, practices, religion that is not only offensive to God, it is absolutely destructive of the nation. So Rehoboam comes and goes. His reign is a disaster, and they are systematically defeated, humbled, and stripped bare of all their treasures. Well, then Abijah comes along. Way, great. And then our hopes are raised, a new leader, a new king. We're still here. Look, Judah's still here. We still got the temple. We still got the priests. We still got the law. We're God's people. Yeah, well, we haven't mentioned about the shrines and the Asherah and the male prostitutes in the land. You know, people don't want to talk about that. No. We've got all the stuff on the outside that looks great, but Abijah, he's no better than his father. In fact, he's worse. And if you put your hope and trust in him, where's that going to lead? Verse 3, he committed all the sins his father had done before him. His heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his forefather had been. Now God had mercy upon Abijah for the sake of David. It says, verse 4, for David had done what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and had not failed to keep any of the Lord's commands all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. Again, honest and true. But David, this is what makes David such a remarkable ruler and such a blessing from God. He sought to do what was right. He failed, as every man will. That's the note of realism. Whether you're talking about politicians, whether you're talking about your marriage or your children or your church, we'll always disappoint one another, but the Lord will never disappoint. So we look beyond men, we look to God. Verse 6, there was war between Abijah and Jeroboam throughout Abijah's lifetime. What happened to God's chosen nation as a result of their foolish rebellion against God's truth? That's what happened. Constant warfare, constant conflict. No peace, no heritage or legacy to pass on. These people, all we know of them really is what's written in the Bible. And imagine that. Imagine that you are known till the end of time as a man who committed all the sins his father had done before him, and who presided over a kingdom where there's constant conflict, no peace, and no hope. Certainly not in men, because there never can be and there never should be. And this is surely teaching us to give up our idols, to turn away from worldliness. There's no hope in this world. Ultimately, we must look up, we must turn to God, we must trust in him and put all of our hope in the Lord alone. Like it says at the end of Psalm 33. We wait in hope for the Lord. He is our help and our shield. In him our hearts rejoice, for we trust in his holy name. May your unfailing love be with us, Lord, even as we put our hope in you. Last day tomorrow, Look forward to it. See you then.